Time for a check of the weather now with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. And as Al mentioned last week, he's off today, but before he left, he recorded a segment to tell us about another weather-related topic we need to know. Take it away, Al.
Well, folks, here we again for the weekly weather segment, and this week we decided to talk to you a little bit about the El Nino Southern Oscillation. This is the area of the equatorial Pacific that we look at for the formation of La Nina and El Nino conditions. Now, typically during El Nino conditions, we see abnormal warming in the equatorial region. During La Nina's abnormal cooling, and those do have an impact, particularly in the southern hemisphere, as it typically peaks right around the Christmas period, which is the middle of their summer period. So for Australia, South Africa, and Brazil, during El Niños we tend to see below normal yields, and during La Niñas above normal yields. The big fly in the ointment is Argentina. During the La Nina events, we typically would expect to see below normal yields, and with El Niños above normal yields. But here in the northern hemisphere, it has a big influence on whether or not we see split flow pattern develop in the United States during the winter period, or that we see a very strong aggressive northern stream pattern. So the most current update of the Enso is that we look here last October, very warm sea surface conditions above normal in the Gulf of Alaska. You'll notice some cooling starting to show up in the eastern equatorial Pacific with a little bit of warmth out in the central equatorial Pacific. Look at the changes that we have experienced since last October. Now we're looking toward the middle of March, and we see well below normal sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Alaska. We're starting to see some warmer than normal sea surface conditions off the very western Aleutian Islands. And we also notice that we're starting to see some cold being drawn into the central equatorial Pacific, and the eastern equatorial Pacific has turned warmer than normal. Conversely, we're also starting to see a return to rainfall in portions of Australia and South Africa. All of these are good indications that we are starting to see a reversal of the fortunes that we've seen under the previous regime, which more El Nino-like dominated. So in terms of the forecast as we go out to this growing season, in January, the most current Enso forecast was that this red line is to say just above the 0-degree line, so more on the warmer phase. You can see that there is a spread in the models, but pretty much consistency in between the models. Now, as we look at the February update, all of a sudden we see a crossover of this red line into the cooler phase of the equatorial Pacific occurring sometime within the May, June, July period, instead of trying to cross way out into the July, August, September period. And the latest update that was released in March shows the same general trend, just a little bit stronger in terms of the intensity of the coolness, but generally turning in the July through August, June, July, August period. So it does look like we're going to move to the cooler side of the equatorial Pacific late this summer, and generally for us here in Nebraska, that means warmer and drier conditions during the fall period. It also means that if this thing takes off a little bit earlier, that we tend to see some drier conditions, particularly in our irrigated areas of western Nebraska, means some increased water usage. So we'll pay particular attention to this next 40 to 45 day period all the way through mid-March, because that definitely will determine the snowpack in the southern Rockies and how vulnerable we are to drought going forward.